from Delhi University, Jawaharlal Nehru University, TEAS, and other central universities during the first wave of COVID-19. Speaking from Margin has previously organized the Research Method lecture series. In this lecture series, noted scholars of social sciences, including Professor Nivedita Menon, Professor Rajiv Bhargava, Professor Kancha Ilaiya, Professor Meena Ketan Behra, and Dr. Sudhir Kumar Shuthar, and others contributed to this initiative and helped us to strengthen the democratic and critical tradition of knowledge. Today, we all are here to discuss a very important issue, that is academic freedom and politics of pedagogy in India, which need to be discussed with significant implications for the future of critical knowledge. Judith Butler, in her article, Academic Freedom and the Critical Task of the University, argues that why is academic freedom essential to the idea of the university? To answer this, let us first ask, what is academic freedom? Academic freedom is both a right and obligation. It allows faculty to pursue lines of research and modes of thought without interference from the government or other external authorities. It gives faculty rights of participation in the making of curricula and the governance of the university. Faculty may consider themselves individuals pursuing their lines of research, but they are also obligated to participate in governance, to foster and direct those institutional relations that secure the task of higher education, which include the task of the university to preserve and support critical thought, even when it is not in the line with official views of the state or other external institution, unquote. We all are here to discuss more about academic freedom and why it is crucial at this juncture when the tradition of critical knowledge is under the threat of chaperone politics. With this brief background, I would welcome our speaker, Professor Nandini Sundar. Professor Nandini Sundar, educated at Oxford and Columbia University. Professor Sundar is a social anthropologist and the Professor of Sociology at the Delhi School of Economics, Delhi University. She has been working with the Adivasi group of Bastar since the 1990s. She is one of the noted academicians and activists who has been studying the issues of tribal groups and advocating the rights of tribal communities. She has authored and edited several books, including The Burning Forest, India's War in Bastar, Civil Wars in South Asia, State Sovereignty Development, Subalterns and Sovereigns, and Anthropological History of Bastar, Branching Out, Joint Forest Management in India, Legal Grounds, Natural Resources, Identity, the Laws in Jharkhand, Anthropology in the East, the Founders of Indian Sociology and Anthropology, A New Moral Economy of India's Forest. Professor Sundar has long been outspoken about the issues of academic freedom. In summer 2020, she submitted a paper on academic freedom to the United Nations. In Academic Freedom in India Status Report 2020, Nandini Sundar argues that academic freedom is about the right to study, teach, and research a diversity of viewpoints. Yet this right that is so crucial for the pursuit of knowledge has seen widespread attacks in colleges and universities across India. She is a former co-editor of India's premier journal, Contribution to Indian Sociology. She is a recipient of the Infosys Prize for Social Sciences in 2010. I would, on behalf of Speaking from Margin, I welcome Professor Nandini Sundar. And again, thank you for accepting our invitation, ma'am. I feel honored to welcome all the participants, researchers, and friends for taking a keen part in this important initiative. I'm sure that you will feel enriched with the knowledge after completion of this discussion. I welcome you all once again to this discussion. Thank you all. And now, Professor Sundar, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidyasagar, and thank you, the entire collective from Speaking from the Margins. It's really a pleasure to speak to you today. I don't know how much longer we're going to have to do things online. I really hope that we can get back to in-person face-to-face discussions, because there is actually so much that I would have liked to ask you about your own experiences with academic freedom, how you think that pedagogy is constrained, because there are several aspects to academic freedom in countries like India, which are different from academic freedom in other countries. I mean, every country has its own specificity, as well as things which we all share in common. So Vidyasagar, I'd speak for about half an hour and we have questions after that. Yeah, okay. So let me just start with the problem that was raised by Kannur University, including Golwalkar and Savarkar and others in their texts, and the objection to having people who are clearly or texts which are clearly espousing hate against one community, talking about a distorted view of Indian history. These are, by all accounts, hate speech in some sense, right? But there is a logic to having them in a course. I myself have in courses on text for our times, for the MPhil, also for MA, taught Golwalkar, taught Savarkar, taught Ambedkar, taught Gandhi, taught Nehru. I think we have to appreciate that what you teach in a university may be different from free speech elsewhere in a non-academic setting, right? Because there is a logic to a university course. If we teach everybody as just these are great minds that we have to study, then that's a different way of, that's not the way that one should approach any kind of text, right? So if I teach Gandhi's Hind Swaraj, I would bring it into discussions with Marx and the Reserve Army of Labor, with questions of technology, with questions of caste. And, similarly, when one teaches Ambedkar's Annihilation of Caste, it's impossible now to have a Sociology of India course and study caste without studying Annihilation of Caste. So I think if you're going to study communalism, if you're going to study competing visions of history, then you have to bring in people like Golwalkar and see them in the original, see them for the kind of hate speech that they are promoting, see the kind of vision of India that they're promoting. And I think our young scholars are completely able to grapple with this complexity, with this diversity, right? So I think it was very unfortunate that Kannur University was asked to remove those texts from their syllabus. Just as it is unfortunate that Delhi University has been forced to remove most recently from the English syllabus the works of Bama, Sankirta Tadani, and Mahashweta Devi. Now, the argument that was made, so that's one aspect of academic freedom, right? The argument that academic freedom is not the same as freedom of expression. Now, at one level, it's not the same as the freedom of expression because one should be allowed to debate more difficult ideas than may be allowed to be available in the public sphere. Like in the public sphere, I have no right to say that somebody is a second-class citizen. I have no right to say that they should not have that Hitler's final solution is something that we should emulate, which is what Golwalkar says. But if I place it in a context, if I place it in the history of a movement, then I think it's important to study. The other way in which academic freedom is not the same as freedom of expression is because as a sociologist or historian or whatever, I'm bound by the demands of my discipline. I can't get up and say anything the way I can say on Twitter or in a public speech. I can't get up and just come unprepared to class, not quote any of the relevant texts, act as if there is no other canon except for whatever I say, right? So I'm bound by the standards of my discipline. As a historian, I was just reading this really excellent article by Meera Vishwanathan, is a critique of Sanjeev Sanyal, and she's talking about how he's saying that he's presenting this novel view of history because nobody's looking at what the negative things that Ashoka said as well as the positive. So she's saying, well, the simple thing that historians learn, the first thing that they learn is source criticism. So you look at a text not just for what it says, but the context in which it was written, who wrote it, why they were writing it, what they were arguing against. So as academics, we are bound by evidence, by logic, by the standards of our discipline, right? This is why we have peer review. Peer review is a mess. I agree. It's you know, we all feel that there is something wrong with the way in which academic standards are set by people in power, often first world, domination comes in terms of who you should cite, who you shouldn't cite. So I'm not saying that there are no problems with, the standards that the university sets, but at the same time, it holds you to certain requirements which are different from the simple requirements of freedom of expression in the public sphere, right? So there are two ways in which we can see how, and which I'm trying to bring out, the difference between freedom of expression and academic freedom. One is that we can debate more complex questions. We can debate things that we cannot really say that we should not say outside as citizens. And we are also at the same time constrained to be more responsible than we would be in the public sphere outside. Okay. So that's two ways in which academic freedom needs to be thought about. The third way, and I think we need to think about academic freedom from our conditions, is look at it as a question of the freedom to produce something positive, right? So it's not just a negative freedom, as in a freedom against somebody telling us that we can say this or we can't say this, but we need to have the positive conditions under which we can produce academic research. And if the country is downsizing its education system, underfunding it, not admitting students from certain backgrounds, from certain regions, practicing casteism and sexism in the academic space, we don't have access to books. Our faculty and our students are precarious, and precarity is a global problem in terms of contractual employment. So when people don't have scholarships to study and they don't have permanent jobs, then really they don't have academic freedom, because under those conditions it's not really possible to produce research without fear, without worrying about, will you get a job if you say something that is, slightly critical of the establishment. If you don't have a PhD, if you're studying for a PhD and you don't have a scholarship, then, you don't have that freedom to actually work, right? So academic freedom, the way it's normally defined in much of the Western discussion around academic freedom, has been twofold. One is, the freedom of academics to do research and teach whatever they like in the classroom. That's one way. The second way has been in the context of what is called cancel culture. And for them, if you look at the sort of reports of the Australian Commission or whatever, they're all protesting about left-wing kind of wokeness or political correctness, which is preventing right-wing ideologues from coming onto campus and speaking, right? So it's more in that context of academic freedom, how much is available. But in India and other countries, increasingly the whole globe is looking like India in terms of the way that jobs are precarious, university scholarships are precarious, fees are getting higher. This aspect of the material conditions under which academic freedom is possible is really important, and it's important not to forget that. Right? So, so just to summarize again, three contexts in which we need to think about academic freedom is: one is the way in which universities should have the right to teach, the idea that academic freedom is about holding you to standards of the discipline of the university, and third, the kind of material conditions which makes it possible for people from diverse communities to contribute to the university, that positive ability to exercise your knowledge, your freedom, etc. Right? Now, recently we know that there's been an all-out kind of assault on academic freedom. Along with colleagues, we drew up a list of tables, which we had first submitted to the UN. So that was the UN rapporteur on freedom of expression was submitting in 2020 a special report on academic freedom. Right? And partly we know, the impetus for that was the kind of mass arrests of academics in Turkey, where 7,000 people have been suspended or dismissed from their jobs. Some people are in jail. Many people, have strictures against them because they signed a letter saying that we should talk about peace talks with the Kurdish people. Right. So it would be the equivalent of that would be. Indian academics signing a petition saying we should, questioning the abrogation of Article 370, or saying that we need kind of dialogue with the Maoists, or, whatever. And if we were all en masse sent to jail. Now, that actually is an important comparison, because I don't know if you would get 6,000 academics to sign a letter about Kashmir. Given the way that Kashmir has been silenced, and Kashmir is currently one of the biggest concerns that we have about academic freedom, because you cannot have academic freedom under the conditions that we have in Kashmir. The internet was shut down for over about a year. And even now it's not available. So, what does it mean to be able to have the right to study and the right to research if you just don't have the material access to do any of that, or you don't, are not able to speak? Apart from the fact that there are so many things which are shut down in terms of conversations. The newspapers have been reduced to, just not really carrying the news initially. At least they were very, very scanty. And the way that, basically Kashmir is a big black hole in life in Kashmir, the conditions under which Kashmiris are living and working. That's really a black hole in the Indian media, and also very much in the Indian academic space. We're not really engaging with the academic rights of Kashmiris, right? Which is, other people are suffering from abrogation of academic rights in terms of specific seminars being cancelled, people being disinvited, attacks on university seminars, as happened in Ramjas or happened in JNU in January 2020. But this is a whole state whose academic freedom is being curtailed, and we have not really, as academics, engaged with that issue. So that was sort of by way of providing some context to why the UN Special Rapporteur was felt. And across the world, I find that increasingly people are becoming worried about academic freedom. And we know that authoritarian governments worldwide have, one of the hallmarks of authoritarian governments is that they crack down on academic freedom. That's one of the first things that they do to kind of disrespect higher education. Say, what's that, so when Prime Minister said, what's the need for Harvard? What you need is hard work. And, you have, Trump making various statements about how, universities are so pointless. So that kind of thing is just very, very common across the world and is very much part of authoritarian governments. So for this report that we submitted to the UN on academic freedom, we had drawn up a list of tables under different headings. So one was the number of seminars cancelled, people, and if you look at, and that's what we drew up was a list of by 2020, about some 60 seminars or events or talks or whatever. And that was mostly only in the central universities. So for instance, the protest against Mahashweta Devi's play Draupadi being shown in Haryana, or Nivedita Menon's talk in Jodhpur University being attacked, or people, Professor Panini and others speaking, Professor Vivek Kumar speaking in Gwalior. Professor Panini was disinvited from Bihar, I think. So there are a number of instances where people have been prevented from speaking. And when you look at what those topics are that are considered too controversial, too, so that academic spaces cannot deal with them, they're all talks about democracy, the constitution, or where the speakers are from JNU or in some other way branded as leftist, right? So clearly some topics have become unacceptable for universities, like the constitution, the need to defend it, democracy, how to understand it, Kashmir, Maoism, etc. We also looked at attacks on students and faculty, the arrests of students and faculty. And right now, I think that is the biggest issue for academic freedom in India. The fact that so many of our young students who were taking part in the anti-CAA protests have been arrested and completely, yesterday was Gulfisha Fatima has been in jail now for 18 months. For what? For protesting against the CAA, right? Omar Khalid has been in jail for over a year. People in Aligarh, people in Jamia, people in JNU, everywhere there is an attack on students. And I'm really proud to say that the first and biggest challenge to the restrictions on academic freedom have come from students. They have not come from faculty, they have not come from anywhere else, but students who have recognized that the quality of education that they get matters, students who have recognized what academic freedom means in their everyday life, either by protesting against casteism, as in Hyderabad University, or by demanding fellowships with the Occupy UGC movement, or when students in FTII started the whole wave of student movements initially by protesting against an unqualified director. So, one of the things that is critical is for there to be, yes. Okay. Yeah, thanks for that, Pranay. Yeah, and since if you're writing in the chat, I would also encourage you all to, I'll talk about this at the end, but I'm trying to compile more details. So I've set up an email, which I hope you will all write into with, more examples of the way in which academic freedom is being curtailed, right? So one is the attacks on seminars. The other is the attacks on faculty and students, the physical attacks. The third, or I'm not saying this in order of importance, because obviously the most important is the arrests of students. The banning of books from various syllabi, as you just mentioned, removal of JP, and including Deen Dayal Upadhyay instead, and the visa restrictions to foreign scholars who are doing research or teaching and, may be critical of, or their work might be critical of government. And the other thing which is a major aspect of this attack on academic freedoms is appointments. Now we know that vice chancellors across the country are being selected for their proximity to a certain ideology. And in many cases, the qualifications might be more than suspect. For instance, I understand that one vice chancellor, who I think has now finished his term, is a professor of economics, but his publications were Mrityu ke baad kya and Shiv tere kitne gun. Now, I have no problem with people writing a book on Shiv tere kitne gun, but I think, as you know, as I said, if you're an economist, you're bound by the standards of your discipline to actually produce some work in economics. And, you know, I don't think this should really qualify you as vice chancellor. So we know that that is not just about unqualified people being appointed to positions and influencing other, you know, influencing the way that syllabi operate, who's invited to refresher courses. But basically, it's about the next 30, 40 years of university life, right? Because then academics reproduce themselves and they select people. You know, you appoint somebody today, then they'll become professor tomorrow, then they'll appoint somebody, etc., etc. Now, I'm not saying that in normal, the normal course of things, people in universities have been fair. We know that even among regular
I think there's a network issue with Nandini Sundar. So please just stay with us. She will be back.
Hi, I'm sorry. There seemed to be some problem.
Yeah, that's the limitation of online. Anyway,
Okay,
no
sorry.
issue. Continue.
Yeah. So I was just saying the, you know, the scale, the range of things in which universities, the kinds of problems that we are facing with academic freedom. One is sort of the negative freedoms, which is about arresting students. I mean, or the negative, the restrictions on liberties, arresting students, attacking faculty, stopping seminars, changing syllabi, banning books, disinviting, not allowing foreign scholars to work. And then there are the more institutional factors which are affecting our academic freedom, which is the contractualization of jobs, the, you know, stopping of fellowships, the appointments, and how not only are most people not getting jobs, but the appointments are skewed. And the fact that this whole new economic, new education policy, the way it's being pushed through with, you know, supposedly giving choice to students, but it's impossible to think of, I mean, it's not like students can, and I would welcome your thoughts on this, right? Because yes, it's good that people can migrate with credits, you know, go from one place to another university and take credits there, etc., etc. But how many people in practice are likely to do this? Because after all, you live in one place, you have hostel accommodation, you have, I mean, and the same goes for faculty as well, right? So the idea that faculty can be moved around universities just because, you know, they have, it's, each department builds up a certain reputation, builds up a certain expertise, and students also are located in a certain place, right? So you don't, I'm not sure that this whole emphasis on freedom and flexibility cross university really makes sense, and whether people will actually ever, I'm speaking from a pedagogical point of view. I'm not even talking about, the workload issue or any of those things. I'm just saying from a teaching point of view, I'm not sure how many people will be able to get up and go and want to get up and go somewhere else, or take time out, and so on and so forth, right? So there's that whole aspect of academic freedom, which is being slowly whittled. I mean, in the name of academic freedom, in the name of greater autonomy, we should be worried when certain kinds of mechanisms appear to give more power to the student, but are actually giving more power to the university administrators. Now, I'm not sure how this will pan out, what it will mean, because we've been guinea pigs, students, faculty, everybody saying DU for the last 10 years, with Dinesh Singh bringing in one thing, then somebody else bringing something. I mean, every year the syllabus changes, something changes, systems change, and we spend all our time looking at what the rules are on any particular day regarding anything. So I think when we fight for our academic freedom, we have to be fighting on all these multiple fronts. And at the same time, expand how we think of academics. Now, I'm going to close now, but I just want to, I've recently begun thinking about who is an intellectual in India today, right? So people keep talking about public intellectuals. Now, that's a very narrow sphere in which we define public intellectuals, because the way that, we define it as people who write in the media or university, but actually university people are no longer or perhaps they've never been influencers, right? So if you look at who is influencing thought and who is influencing people's ideas about themselves, about the world, on the one hand, it's popular media. Second is the kind of WhatsApps that are being forwarded, and the whole way that, and even within the world of social media, there are these people called influencers, right? So people who have large Twitter followings, or Kunal Kamra. I mean, Kunal Kamra is a good influencer, but I'm just saying, people get their ideas from, they're not getting their ideas from, university readings. They're getting their ideas from social media and other spaces. And if you look at the kinds of discussions around intellectuals, now Gramsci had this distinction that he made between organic intellectuals and traditional intellectuals, right? So organic intellectuals are people who are part of the communities that they are working with. So, for instance, Dr. Darshan Pal is to me an organic intellectual. He's coming out of the farmers' movement. He's, he's coming out of the university also, but he's, or some of the other farmers' movements, farmer leaders, they are framing a vision for the country, right? Or what democracy should be, what the kind of land laws, laws around farming should be, you wouldn't count them as intellectuals in the kind of traditional academic sense of people who are going to universities, but they are clearly setting the terms of the agenda, setting the terms of public discourse. Then you have, Foucault had this idea of specific intellectuals, right? People who are experts in their field. And we've seen with COVID, for instance, all the doctors who have been coming on, to talk to us, to explain to us what COVID is about, what is the best treatment. They are specific intellectuals in their field, and they are contributing through their particular work, right? So perhaps that age of, the big cross-disciplinary intellectual was never there or never existed. But we need to start thinking about the relationship between the university and these other spheres of intellectual input, ideas, and the fact that so much of our knowledge is disappearing. Knowledge about that people, because of the whole shift to the urban displacement of people. People are losing that knowledge of the environment. They're losing that knowledge about crafts, and instead getting this kind of anemic university education. So I seriously sort of worry about what counts as, standards in the university. Where are we really relating to what is going on around us? And how do we do that in a way that preserves the university as a space that you can actually study, create knowledge, and at the same time open it up to the wider community of ideas and thought. So I'll just stop at that. Okay. So are there questions or comments?
Yeah, I think it's really structured and thought-provoking points we have raised. And I think the way the state is doing these things in the university space is not in terms university spaces. Parallelly, we have to think about the primary education and the secondary education, because the pedagogy, they are the reshaping, the redesigning. It's going to be change the whole discourse for a longer time.
Yeah,
it's just not about the university curriculum, but the way the textbook has been designed by the NCERT in this day. You can find how the ideological interventions are reframing the whole method of inquiry, or whole process of critical inquiry in the schoolings, in colleges and university. So I open the floor for the discussion. Participants are unmute yourself, and whatever your question, comments, observation you want to. Ishan, go ahead.
Thanks, Vidya. Thanks, Professor Sundar. On the point about the intellectual, about what it means to be an intellectual, I thought, I am doing my fieldwork in Banaras on the influx of money with the Smart City program and how the ghats have transformed. And in the process, I was talking to the Mallahs here. So in a discussion, a respondent of mine was made a claim that, to really help our cause, we need people who are very educated. But what he said did not actually, but at least I felt, and it was pretty clear to me, that what he meant was not in terms of educational qualification, but perhaps in the sense of empathy. So, how do we think to include something like empathy in education? Do we not, or empathy is something that perhaps everyone can do with more empathy, and you don't really need an education?
That's a very interesting question, and I think so. An ideal teacher, regardless of discipline, should be empathetic, right? I'm not saying that I'm particularly empathetic, but in my ideal world, I think that the academic space demands empathy, right? So if you are, because you can only learn, and like when you because you learn a lot from student questions, you learn a lot from people raising different points of view, so that empathy is something that one has to inculcate as a professional kind of requirement, right? And as a sociologist or anthropologist or historian or in the social sciences, again, you have to be empathetic to your material. So I think that that is a very important attribute of being an academic and translating it to your research, your teaching, and everybody else. So I think if the Mallas feel that they need a more empathetic, more people who engage with them empathetically, then I think that they're onto something important. As in, I don't know if that really addresses your question, but or comment?
I don't think it was much of a question, but yes, I did need something to think about it. So thanks.
Okay. And Anuradha, your question about whether the target of attack is more on the social sciences, I don't think so. I think that it's more visible in the social sciences, also because we in the social sciences talk about it a bit more. But if you look at the kinds of projects that are being funded in science, there is, I mean, scientists are complaining about how the departments which used to fund them have stopped funding, and instead there are various projects to do with cows and various other things, astrology, which are being funded. So definitely there's a kind of move towards a regressive kind of science. I mean, I have no problem with studying all sorts of interesting science. I mean, I think there is the need to study, alternatives to the standard science. But I think, one should have more conversations with scientists to see, because I think they are deeply unhappy as well. I mean, there have been protests also. They marched and a couple of years ago. So I don't have all the details about sciences right now on hand, but I can send you some if you're interested. Yeah, so just I wanted to say that please, if you have details about things being taken off syllabi, seminars being stopped, attacks on anyone, please write to indiaacademicfreedom@gmail.com with the details. Yeah, because we're just compiling a list of. Okay.
Any comment, observation, question? You are free to ask. Suman, go ahead.
Am I audible? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for a very interesting talk. I have a short question. I just wanted to know what are your thoughts on the manner in which academic writing or academia is perceived in not just in the social media but also amongst the masses, because also your thoughts on whether we need to rethink about what kind of a language is used to represent ourselves. For example, taking cues from the JNU movement, Kanhaiya Kumar becomes more popular because of the manner in which he communicates rather than the others who have always been put to the background because they spoke, as the criticism goes, in a very academic language. So what are your thoughts on reaching out and the role of social media that academics can pursue in? Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, I think again that's a really good question, because this, academic language is a big problem. I see this a lot, that we are not communicating with, the public. And I find it sad when students, I see that, they all begin to write in a particular way. And I also learned to write in a particular way, that because that's seen as, good academic jargon, right? And I do think that we need to change the way we write and the way we speak, in order to open up to a larger audience, and which is not the same as saying that we do popular work without full research, right? I mean, because you can have densely referenced material, but just written more accessibly. And I think it's also important to write in a way that if it was translated or if it was written in some other language, how would people there react, right? So we only have that community of small English-speaking social scientists in mind when we write journal articles, but we need to have the communities about whom we are studying. So if you're writing about mullahs, you have to write thinking that the mullahs might one day read your article, and what they would make of it, or whether they would think it was made any sense, right? So you need to write in multiple ways, maybe. That's, I mean, and that's a very important part of how we think about our academic research. Why do you think Anand's question? I think Fancy also had a question, but Anand's question is, why was freedom of these movements about universities started by students and not by faculty? Well, I'd be interested in knowing what you think about it, but my thing is that we are all very comfortable as academics in the sense of we get our salaries and we are more concerned with our leave and our salaries than students. So because it's like students are like workers, you have nothing to lose but your chains. So, you know, that's one reason why students are more active. Also, maybe students are more concerned about the future than we are as faculty, because we are like, bas sab khatam, and, you know, we'll be retiring soon or whatever. So whereas students, this is your future, the universities. So maybe, so, but I'd like to know why you think, I mean, I'm interested as to why students were more active. Darshana, you're saying the list of banned books going to be opened up to the public. What do you mean? Banned books, will the books be unbanned? Is that what you're saying? Or anyways, I'm sending you my wire, the tables that list whatever we have so far. So any more questions? Fancy Jamaica has a question, I think.
Okay.
But you have left, I don't know.
Go ahead.
Can I ask?
Sure, go ahead.
Ma'am, this is Mayur.
Hi, Mayur.
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, just I wanted to know one thing. Is it after post 2014, or it was existing before 2014 also, like such an act like academic freedom, in the sense of banning books, removing syllabus, all this? Do you have any experience? Because I haven't seen it. So do you have any experience before 2014 like that?
Yeah, so there were a few cases. For instance, Rohinton Mystery's book on the emergency, Such a Long Journey, being removed from the Bombay University syllabus, or you had A.K. Ramanujam's 300 Ramayanas being removed from the DU history syllabus. This was in Dinesh Singh's time, right? So before 2014. But if you look at those were a few cases. They were not the kind of huge wave that we've had since 2014. If you look at international indexes also, there's a global academic freedom index. So in that also, they show a very sharp decline from 2014 onwards in academic freedom. So it's not like there was never any case of attacks on academic freedom. Chinese and Pakistani scholars have always faced problems in getting visas to visit India, even for conferences, or leave alone doing research. So that has always been a problem. But since 2014, it's been a problem on multiple fronts. And I don't remember any other situation, certainly in the ever since last 30, 40 years, where after the emergency, where people are being arrested on such a mass scale. I mean, this is completely unprecedented, the attack on all the anti-CAA protesters.
Okay, thank you.
Radha has a question. She's asking, can we say that the target of attack on academic freedom is more on social sciences than the technical?
No, I don't think so. I just responded to Anuradha's question saying there are problems in the sciences also.
Any other question, comment? Suman. Abhijit Wagre, go ahead.
Hello, Nandini. I have one question. In July 2021 itself, the government announced in Parliament that there are no manual scavenging deaths. how do you think that this will impact on the technical, academic researchers, or those who are working on, like, because on the ground field as a researcher, we work and we know what are the ground realities, but on the other side, the government is saying itself that there are no dates. So how do you think that this will impact the future of the academic researchers or writers? Yeah.
So that's a good example of the way in which research has to be critical of government data, right? So you need, as a researcher, to look at multiple sources of data, of which government data is increasingly unreliable. Now, in many spheres, people have pointed out, including people who were on the committees to look at statistical data, etc., that is that data collection is a problem. So I think any good researcher who is researching this issue will have to, go on the ground, get data from other organizations, do their own field research. And I think it's a huge tragedy that we used to have a good statistical system. We used to have, manual scavenging, of course, the government has been in denial for other reasons, but even in terms of regular, even census data or economic statistical data or whatever, they are really, on employment, for instance, they're withholding data. So that's something that really researchers will have to address. How do you deal with this faulty government data? Darshana, yeah, I guess we will, once we update the tables, then it'll be available to everybody. So if anyone wants to help to keep the tables going, then, please write to that email as well. Yeah. But so far, what we have up to 21 is there on that, in the Wire article that I sent you. Okay. Anitya is asking a question about the politics of recognition. What precisely do you mean?
Anitya, are you there?
Anitya, you want to expand on your question?
I think.
Okay.
Okay.
She's saying yes.
If you're comfortable, ask directly.
Okay, I want to ask a question. How did your group, how did you start your group, and how did you get all the people in the group involved?
So,
is it by word of mouth? How have you managed to start?
No. The first wave when it started, we all were forced to back to the home. So we missed that, academic culture or discussion. So in that time, most of my friends from the department, I'm a doctoral candidate at Department of Legal Science. I'm working with Professor Kumar. So me and
you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and most of my friends from JNU, Ishan from the IIT Bombay, Sangharsh from the TEAS, and the other central universities as well. So they will join and we collaborated, and we started this initiative to bring the faculties to and make kind of form a bridge between this, debate. This is not happening since a long time. 2 months ago, we started this research method lecture series because most of the young students they are going applying for the different universities. So some sort of guiding them as a obligation or as a responsibility for the part of the research institution. So we started that series. So we got very overwhelming responses from the participants, and then we carry the different discussions on the different issues. So yeah, that's a small story.
Okay. That's really nice. It's so good that you started this. I think Suman and Anitya have raised hands. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Anitya.
Hello? I'm audible? I'm audible?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah.
Yeah. So my question about that the politics of recognition means that the many in academia, the knowledge from comes from indigenous knowledge. So from knowledge come from tribal. So the knowledge from come to the caste. So the most in academia is a control by the upper caste, the Brahmins and other upper caste people in academia. And if they don't recognize the knowledge of Dalits, those are producing knowledge, tribals knowledge. So in the case of academic freedom, so we're talking about in the fascist way, the fascist with the fascist powers and the control the states. They controlled to the knowledge of universities producing. But in the context of we see in academia, the most of upper caste they hegemonize the all knowledge and the supremizing all knowledge, and they try to control the knowledge comes from the Dalits and Adivasis. So how do we see this knowledge in freedom according to the Dalits and tribals? Because they don't recognize what are they talking, what are they the producing the knowledge. They don't recognize that this is exactly knowledge. They framework of knowledge exactly, and this is that is exactly knowledge. But so that is very problematized in academia that someone decided the framework what is exactly knowledge, and someone says this is not knowledge, this is not framework. So this is not knowledge it will be possible that is also knowledge, but they don't recognize that knowledge. So how to look about that, and how can we deal about this knowledge? Are you understanding my question, ma'am?
Yeah, no, completely. I think it's a really good question. It's very, very pertinent because, as I was saying, that university. So on the one hand, we talk about standards in the university. On the other hand, those standards are divorced from what's actually happening in the country and the different kinds of knowledge that different people bring, right? So Dalits, Adivasis, women, variety of different communities. So there are two things that you're talking about, right? One is how to get the knowledge that is produced by these communities accepted as knowledge in kind of formal settings. Is that right? That's one aspect. So, for instance, let me take an example from a field that I'm familiar with, say forest um, forest management or forest conservation, right? So up to now, the forest department thinks that it has the monopoly of knowledge about how to conserve forests, what is required, which trees should be grown, etc. Whereas we know that Adivasi communities have a much, much deeper understanding of forests, of ethnobotany than um, anybody in the forest department, because they're doing it as a job and people are actually living and have long years of experience, and language also reflects that kind of knowledge. Now, so there are two things here. One is, how do we change what counts as knowledge in the formal setting? Second, how do we make sure that people who have that knowledge are the ones who are also have a voice in that academic setting, right? So it's not just that, communities indigenous knowledge is counting as knowledge and is then appropriated by upper caste researchers who will write about it and uh, you know publish on it, but it has to be both, that the community is able to um, validate that knowledge and the community is able to be the one who is bringing that knowledge in front. Now, I think we have to connect primary education to higher education, because there is no other way that I can see whereby communities will be able to, say this is my knowledge and this is I will write about it in these ways. And our universities have to open up to have that conversation with schools. And I mean, I don't see why we can't, for instance, like our academic spaces are just shut after 5 o'clock in the evening, right? I mean, right now they're just shut all day, all night, forever. But, even in normal times, the classrooms are unoccupied. We don't actually engage with students. We don't do anything. And we have to demand fundamentally good primary education for everybody. We have to engage with communities around where our colleges are to, bring them and have a dialogue with them, which means changing our language, changing who we write for. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done around changing the terms of discourse and bringing in communities who can change those terms of discourse. And I think it's, important that we do that and not just like confine ourselves to writing academic articles for other academics. I don't know if this really addresses what you're saying, but
Anitya?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay.
Pranay, how can we convey our message to as many people as possible? I don't know which context you are talking. So, Nandini,
which message? I mean,
Pranay?
Whatever message.
Pranay, are you there?
Who, me?
No, Pranay. Pranay has... Pranay?
I mean, normal people. We're also normal people, but I guess you mean non-academic people, right? Who are a bit more normal than us. What message should we convey to them? I mean, it depends. Okay, I mean, just like, I mean, I think we just have to go out there and argue. I mean, I know that I certainly waste a lot of time on Twitter and, other things. Social media is not going to, unless we create things that we can, like little videos or whatever. Like I had an argument with a guide in Shivaji's fort, and he said that Nehru had Gandhi killed. And I said, no, Nehru did not have Gandhi killed. He said there was a fourth bullet. You don't know. So we had a long argument about, then he said, anyways, Gandhi deserved to be killed. So, he said Gandhi didn't do anything for the freedom movement. Now, and I said, but this is not according to, he says, oh, you studied the wrong history. You don't know anything, which is like, how does one counter this except by engaging with people in conversation? Right now, you can say that on the one hand, it's true that the knowledge that we have in the university is problematic. We know when it comes to many things, as Anitya pointed out, that certain kinds of knowledge is not validated as knowledge. On the other hand, certain kinds of knowledge we know is, historically accurate, that Nehru did not kill Gandhi. But how are we going to communicate it to people outside, right? So we have to go out and talk to as many people as we can, individually, collectively, engage with the kinds of questions that people are asking and their concerns, because otherwise, how are we going to know what, what is it that we should be saying? I don't know, Pranay, if you had a specific context in mind. Okay.
Suman, you have raised your hand. You have question or comment you want to share with us? I think it forget to lower the hands. Anyway, so any...
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask for the case against Sci-Hub and open access resources. So how do we see it? is it a restraint on like as they say that it's more of a piracy, or it's not that legitimate to use such resources? So how do we see it? Is it also an attack on like the academic freedom? And then the second thing that I wanted to ask is about education getting expensive, while there is only one way that is coming, like there's only one stream, like which we can understand. So it is getting expensive, but the quality in the way like the democratic spaces are getting reduced. So so how do we see this paradox?
Just 1 second. In I'm not sure I understood the paradox of education getting more expensive, but quality of education being reduced, right?
Yeah, in the way that academic freedom getting reduced, so there is only one idea of India maybe, or one way of knowledge that is that is being taught. So it is getting expensive, but the availability of different viewpoints and like that is getting reduced.
So that's straightforward cheating by the government, right? That you are like giving less quality for more money. So, you know, as a academic, if you think of yourself as a producer, you are, I mean, we are cheating the students basically. That you're overcharging for poor quality goods. Whereas, in fact, certain things like education should be free and a fundamental right. I mean, maybe not higher, like maybe you don't have a right to do a PhD, but you certainly have a right to primary education. And that again is something that, you know, has to be fought for as not a, it's not so much a paradox, but it's something that is just straightforward wrong. Because, but these are two separate issues. One is in a way that you should be getting good quality education regardless of how much you pay for it. Whether you pay nothing for it or you pay a lot for it, you should be getting the same quality public education, right? Or the public should make sure that you get the same quality education. It's not like private universities should be giving better education because people are paying for it over there, and we in public universities should not be giving good education. I mean, that's simply not the case, because it's a right to equality to a fundamental public good. The first question that you asked about LibGen and Sci-Hub, and see, it is piracy in one sense, but in another sense, and yes, I know a lot of publishers are upset about this because they feel that, you know, they spend a lot of money going, you know, doing the editing, finding the books, publicizing them, all of that. But on the other hand, so much of this depends on the unpaid labor of academics or the funding provided by universities, right? So nobody, no university academic survives on royalties from their books. We write books not because we are going to get any money out of it, but because we want to say something or do research, we enjoy it, etc., right? So the amount of money that goes into producing a book, doing the research, is not compensated by the publisher or by the sales. So in a way, it's not piracy because it's coming from publicly funded education. Secondly, as journal articles, we all do so much unpaid labor refereeing journal articles, and then the publishers of those journal articles put them behind such high paywalls that it's, you know, that we ourselves are paying for things that we have helped to produce, right? So it's complete case of commodity fetishism, where the worker is producing something and then it begins to be seen as an object outside of the worker, and something which, you know, it's no longer the product of our labor. It's something that is something that we need to cite, we need to get access to. So it's a clear case of a capitalist exploitation of the labor of students and teachers and the public university. And we I would not have been able to teach a single class during lockdown if we didn't have LibGen and Sci-Hub. All my reading has come um, from these sources. And, you know, also the other aspect is also that if you are going to reduce the number of academic jobs, academic, fellowships, etc., you're saying that people have no right to knowledge. So if you're not in a university and you don't have access to university library, does that mean you have no right to knowledge? So how else are you going to get this knowledge? It has to be more free and accessible. And I think they're heroines. I mean, that LibGen person and the Sci-Hub person. And I don't see them as pirates at all. It's like Google is using all our free data to make better algorithms for itself. It's like using all our whatever we type in to improve its own search abilities, etc. So we are constantly working for providing free labor for a capitalist enterprise in the technology field. So it's time that we got something back.
Yes, thank you.
So don't feel bad about piracy. Just go ahead and look at LibGen.
Yeah. Just one
Thank
source.
you.
Thank you, Anuradha, for bringing this thing, because it's really an important part of the academic freedom. Unless you are not able to access the literature and the research produced by the existing scholars, how can we exercise the freedom? You write about that. So we need that accessibility. So I think we should wind up this discussion, or any comment, observation, I think. No, no? Okay. So I started discussion with Judith Butler. She's my favorite philosopher and thinker. So I would like to end the discussion with Butler's quote. Chapter written, I think, edited by Akhil Bilgrami, and who is afraid of academic freedom. Chapter written by Judith Butler, exercising rights, academic freedom, and boycott politics. So I like to quote, and I'll bind the discussion. The thesis that academic freedom is conditioned presupposes that there are institutional structures that make academic freedom possible and protect its ongoing exercise. What does it matter if there are such conditions? Is academic freedom not separable from the conditions of its existence? My suggestion is that academic freedom is a conditioned freedom, and that it cannot rightly be taught or exercised without those conditions. So when we defend academic freedom, we defend the complex institutional conditions that make its exercise possible. And we understand those conditions and its exercise as bound up with one another. If the conditions fall away, the exercise becomes impossible. This may seem like a reasonable position, and yet it is often forgotten when debates on academic freedom get underway. Indeed, we take the durable support of educational institutions for granted in most academic debates, and we defend the right to education as if it were a separate matter from the right to academic freedom. And yet, if it is only on a if it is the only on the condition that institutions prove durable, that the exercise of academic freedom becomes possible, it follows that when and if those institutions prove precarious, then the possibility of exercising the right of academic freedom is correspondingly imperative. If there are conditions without which there can be no exercise of that right, then those conditions ought to be understood as components of the right itself. In this way, the right to academic freedom presupposes a right to education and a broader social commitment to making educational institutions accessible, affordable, and durable. On this note, I would like to convey note a very thanks to Professor Nandini Sundar for accepting and for this thought, proving very critical framing sort of idea of the academic freedom, and we all are supposed to be fight this battle together, because this is not just a battle of one person. Because if you're part of the academic structure, we have to come, you have to take your position. We have to defend the idea of justice, fraternity, and rights, whatever the idea we are supposed to be, because the process of learning and unlearning is continuous going on. you have to take your positions. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you for this wonderful discussion. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And thank you to all participants and who participated in this discussion and made this discussion very wonderful and very fruitful, productive. So thank you all. Stay safe and
Thank you,
stay
Vidya
tuned
Sagar
in.
and everybody, and all of you. Please call me. Feel free to call me Nandini, and I hope to meet you.
Yeah.
Some of you I already know, and hope to see you others later in person. Yeah. Thanks again. Thanks a lot. I
Thank
enjoyed it.
you.
Yeah.
Bye. Take care.
All great questions. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you.